for my MBA. And I think it's the most important topic in the whole world because it applies to every single business that you can possibly imagine. And it's competitive strategy is important because it's all the fundamental questions of what is the purpose of a business and how do businesses achieve that purpose. So this session, it's kind of theoretical, probably much more than the other sessions that you've had from the syllabus that I saw. But I tried to use a lot of examples, so it's less theoretical. But I think the theory that you get here, at least my experience when I first learned about competitive strategy, it's theory that you'll use again and again and again. So even if you don't see the value immediately right now, hopefully you see the value later as you think about other businesses. Yeah, okay. So can you all just, I know most of you, but can you just introduce yourselves and tell me what business you're working on? I know none of you.
Okay. My name is Nasser Zalmout from the Dalili company from Fast Forward. Dalili is a social-powered guidance application that provides notifications of nearby attractions, personalized content based on the user's interests and needs. Yeah, Dalili in a nutshell.
Good, great.
I am Mohammed Tahia. I work with Nasser in Dalili. I am the CTO. More like the smooth and technical things.
Shad from Dalili, also Fast Forward program. Dalili tracks, notifies, and finds the local business to receive your money.
Very nice short pitch.
We had enough, about 5 sentences.
It's really hard to do, especially at the beginning of Fast Forward. It's really hard to reduce your summary.
My name is Ahmed Omar, CTO. I'm Suresh. I'm the CEO and founder of the Store. It's an online platform for online shopping and ordering in your local supermarket.
And Hassan Nasruddin, CEO Pro platform program. For the online platform that assists people operating in MENA region, mitigating risk.
Physical risk.
Lucas Riley, founder of Fez, a portal for married couples for relationship sexual education, as well as products.
I wanted to use you as an example, but I'm not sure what you have to do.
Ravana Bushira, founder of Khazaneh. Khazaneh is an online platform that connects customers to their favorite brands and tailored outfits.
Cool. And so do you all know your businesses, each other's businesses fairly well? Yeah?
Well, sure. Okay, differentiate. Okay. So
the
Red Cross.
We're not in the middle.
Okay, well, I was kind of funny with that. Okay, well, you're going to learn that today.
No, I mean Dalili versus Baridi, perhaps. Okay. All right.
You should learn about each other's businesses because I'm sure you're all facing similar problems. For the purposes of today, it's fine to just have an idea. All right, so okay, so the topics I want to try and cover, first, what is the definition of competitive advantage? Again, it's going to be fairly theoretical, but it's a really big question, and a lot of people in business study this question in great detail. So we'll spend a lot of time on that, and I want to discuss as much as possible because it is theoretical. I want to get you to interact to understand what it is. Next, we'll talk about Porter's 5 forces, which is like the big theory of competitive advantage. If you took a course, an MBA course in competitive advantage, this is what you'd spend most of your introductory course on. So we'll go through it and we'll do a few examples. And then if we have time, and I very much doubt we will, we'll do a competitive view of product design applied to Khazaneh, actually. And I'll share it with you regardless of whether we get to Okay, so that's the plan. So to start with, we want to figure out what the heck is competitive advantage. And so because I wanted this to not be too theoretical, I found this guy that you might know, and a product he launched that you might know. It's called the iPhone. Yeah, and this is Steve Jobs.
So, iPhone is like having your life in your pocket. It's the ultimate digital device. So what should we price to that? Well,
yes,
what do these things normally cost? An iPod, the most popular iPod, $199 for 4 gig nano. What's a smartphone cost? Well, they say you get the phone and some of the internet with it, although that's questionable. But they cost somewhere between around $299. You can get them for $199. Palm just introduced a new one at $399 yesterday. So generally average about $299 with a 2-year contract. Now, these phones sort of do music, but nobody uses them for music because they're not very good. And so they end up buying an iPod to go with the phone. We know we sell the iPod. And so people spend $499 on this combination. What should we charge for iPhone? Because iPhone's got a lot more than this stuff, right? It's got video, real video. It's got this beautiful, gorgeous wide screen. It's got multi-touch user interface. It's got Wi-Fi. It's got a real browser. It's got HTML email. It's got cover flow and on and on and on. And this stuff would normally cost hundreds of dollars. So how much more than $499 should we price iPhone? Well, we thought long and hard about it. Because iPhone just does so much stuff. So much better experience on a call and managing your contacts and visual voicemail, random access voicemail for the first time, and texting and email and real browser and Google Maps and tremendous iPod and cover flow and video. What should we price this thing at? Well, the 4 gigabyte model, we're going to price it at that same $499. No premium whatsoever. $499. And we're going to have an 8 gigabyte model.
So it's really weird to see this video, right? I mean, it's the iPhone wasn't that long ago, and all the features he listed seem so basic now. But it demonstrates a really hard question that businesses go through, which is pricing. But it also demonstrates the good question of value creation. And so I want to use this video. So the point of the video there is that they're introducing the iPhone, trying to figure out, justify the price of $499, and he's saying, well, you're combining an iPod with a phone, so those things, one is $200, another is $200, so it's $400, or $500 is what we should charge. And that's a value creation question. He claims that they've created more value. So what was the price? He said $500 is the price of the phone. And he did some explaining. What is the value to the customer, according to Steve Jobs, for that phone, in terms of the price? Sorry?
Things in one device, and we don't have to carry 2 devices.
You don't have to carry 2 devices. Okay.
Same price.
Same price. So you're saying he said for the customer is $500.
Much more than $500.
What?
Priced only at $500.
Because if you want to take all the services in the iPhone, you have to pay for like 5 or 6 devices.
Okay.
So it's more, you have to pay more money and you have to own more devices at the same time. Typically all of that, the device is one more, 2 devices.
Okay, so the price, the value to the customer is greater than $500, right? That's clear. And he mentioned hundreds of dollars for those extra features that you're getting. So we're going to say that the value to the customer is $700 or more. He said hundreds with an S of dollars, so we'll say 200. We know it's at least $700 is the value to the customer. And in competitive advantage, we call this the customer's willingness to pay. So this is the value that you're giving to the customer. You give to the customer $700 of value, and you charge them for $500 of value because you're a really nice guy. And I'm going to tell you that the cost of production, it's actually, for the original iPhone, was $227. We'll make it $200 for easy math. So these three numbers are the sort of the fundamentals of competitive advantage. You have the cost of production, in the case of the iPhone, $200. The price that they decide to charge to the customer, $500. And the customer's willingness to pay, or the value to the customer, which is $700 or more. Clear so far? Okay. So if we take these three things and we sort of get the main model of competitive advantage, what is the value that Apple has created here? How much value in the world has Apple created by introducing an iPhone? Value. What is the value in the world that Apple has created? What has it done that it didn't, that the world didn't have?
Actually, you can't have just a single answer for that because it affected the world in different domains, socially, economically.
Give me a number.
Oh, okay, that's more difficult.
Dollars. $200 of value. Why?
Because the price that the customer was ready to pay for the two devices before the iPhone was $500.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're getting more, 200 more without paying them, so they're getting more value.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a value of 200 for the price of product.
Okay, that's actually a really good argument. Compared to before, we could say that if you compare only to the additional value from the previous devices. For this device alone, though, how much value does Apple create? $500. Why?
Because the cost of production is 200. The value they added is 500.
Right.
For the customer, $700.
Right.
Because they are willing to pay $700 for the device. That's what Apple says. But they charge them $500 because, as you said, they want to give a nice piece.
Right. Yeah. So from the customer is receiving $700 of value, but the business, Apple, had to pay a price to generate $700 of value. They paid $200. So in the world of competitive advantage, Apple produced $500 of value. Oh, I forgot this slide. So if we just move these to the left, customers' willingness to pay is on the top, as before. And Apple, as a business, created $500. It took $200, and it created something worth $700. And that's really the core of business, is you put some money in, the cost of production, and you get some value out. And that's the value that you create. All businesses, whether it's a tech business or a falafel stand, do exactly this. There is a cost of production, there is a price that the customer is willing to pay, which must be above the price that the business charges to the customer. And the difference between what the customer is willing to pay and what the business paid is the value that the business creates.
The price that the customer is willing to pay must be above the price that we charge them.
Yes. Why?
So they can get the value in the product.
What if so the question is, let me ask, what if the price that the customer is willing to pay is below the price that the company charges?
You will not buy it.
Why?
Because
He doesn't have to pay that.
Exactly.
So there's no value.
he
created
doesn't
for the customer.
feel that it deserves that much.
And what if the customer's value is below the cost of production?
He doesn't have a product here.
Yes.
You don't have a product.
Yeah, but still it depends on your target. Like some luxury products can have its own target.
Exactly. Actually, I wanted to say that. How would you calculate the customer's willingness to pay?
Sometimes you create them.
Exactly.
But if they actually pay for it, it's because the value that they've received is greater than the value they've paid. Otherwise, they wouldn't buy it.
Yes.
Would you ever buy something that you think is worth less than what you're paying for it?
People do actually. Like if you bring a Rolex watch, if people do work so hard on the brand to make it feel more valuable than it really is, people won't pay $30,000 for a President Rolex, for example, because it's worth $1,500.
Why is it worth $1,500?
Because the gold is worth $1,500.
But is the $1,500 which number on here is that?
Okay, the cost of production. Right.
So when a customer pays a price for a Rolex watch, they're paying, that's their willingness to pay is the ridiculous price. The production price is the $1,500. Is that right?
No.
What was you were saying it depends on the target segment.
Yes, like you can like price your product much higher than the willingness. The normal willingness to pay. So some like rich people, depends on your target, will buy it just because no one other have. So like if you want to narrow your target, you can narrow your target and raise your price.
Okay.
Exclusivity.
Sure, but those really rich people who buy it because it's really expensive, the value that they give to the product is greater than the production price, right?
Greater than the production price? Right.
So things you don't have to give it a value, but at least you need to know that it's higher than the production.
Besides, like everybody else, it increases the value of that product with envy. And like, oh, I wish I had that product, but I can't afford it. So it makes everybody else even want more. Other people who can afford it, gives them that feeling that they, they're unique because they have it. So it increases the value.
People arguing.
Everybody
That's like a plus
knows.
so we not live out of this very, very small, very extremely small
What about
market.
Louis Vuitton bags?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
here, Roman has a comment.
What's the just
Roman, hold on.
I'm talking about Louis Vuitton bags. Everybody wants to have them. Like, girls are willing to raise money to get this bag. Like, they're willing to work hard, really hard, like, for a year to get this bag, even if they can't afford it in a month.
And so what is from here? What is that? What are you talking?
So now I'm talking about things you said that sometimes even if their willingness to pay is not, they can't reach it. Some people like the value of the product or the branding or whatever it is makes people want to have it, even if they don't have enough money to get it.
Well, so to Ashraf's point, when the branding of a product or the exclusivity of a product, what is that doing in this graph here?
Increases the willingness to pay. Customers' willingness to pay. Why?
So it's just a strategy of the company to increase the willingness to pay. It's just a marketing strategy to increase the willingness to pay. And it works because, and when people buy that product, they feel the value of the additional money. They feel they wouldn't buy the product if they didn't get value in excess of what they paid, right? You would never buy something if the price that you're willing to pay is less than the price of the product. I hope not. Then you would be not a rational buyer. Okay, so does this model more or less make sense? Okay, so another question here. According to Apple, if we accept Steve Jobs' analysis, what is the maximum price that Apple could charge to customers? $700. Right. And will customers buy at that price?
They do already.
Well, for the original iPhone. We're talking the original iPhone.
Yes.
Right. So they will still pay, but any business must leave value to the customer. Right. The typical pricing question, without doing the class on pricing, is how much value do you leave to the customer and how much value do you keep for the company? Which is ultimately a competitive question.
But you have to do it at that time because it was the first iPhone. And now the new iPhones are for $700 because they're really good.
Right, and I think that's an important point. When this product launched here, it wasn't clear what is the value of the blue box there, how big is the blue box there, what is the value of the original features? No. Hi.
Yeah, makes sense.
We can see.
What's that?
We can see.
Oh.
Can you see your
Okay, any questions so far? Okay. All right, so now, I want to make sure you know. Okay, so we gave $200 of value to the customer, $300 is kept for the company. Now, oh no, that's the slide I wasn't supposed to. Pretend you didn't see that.
See what? Exactly.
Great. Okay, so according to this little model that we've created, how can a company, if we just look at the graph here, what can a company do to create more value in the world?
I'm trying hard not to see what I
Exactly.
see.
Okay, so tell me what you just saw.
Reduce the cost.
Right, reduce costs. So it's one. Right. So in competitive advantage, the first way to increase value that you give to the customer, or the way you increase value in the world as a company, is by reducing the cost of production. So the next question should be obvious. What is the second way to create value?
Increase the customer's willingness to pay.
Yes. Did everybody get that? So increase how much, so method one, reduce cost of production. Method two, increase the customer's willingness to pay. Because you can't see the screen.
So we're like,
Why don't we move it?
I think now it should be perfect.
Or you move it back a bit.
Or if you switch seats with the line.
Yeah.
And then
No,
You just want to take a picture of your position. How's that?
I think it's
Can you
good.
see everything? All right.
good now?
Thanks, Victoria. I think you're-
Okay. Okay, so
عشان الصوت برضه.
نقدر حتى كمان حط.
You're still on the camera.
so I shouldn't move.
Now they can see it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's good. Gotcha. Okay, so we have two ways in order for a business to create more value. One is by reducing the cost of production. Another is by increasing the customer's willingness to pay. Clear? Pretty straightforward from this beautiful presentation. Okay, all right, before we get to that. Okay, so this is the definition of competitive advantage. I just gave you all the key aspects of what is competitive advantage. So every business must create value that is in excess of the cost that they pay to produce that value. And how do we define value? Value is defined by the customer's willingness to pay, and nothing else. Another key component of competitive advantage is the value that you produce, that excess above cost. You have to split it with the customer. It doesn't have to be even split, but you share value with the customer. Some of the value you take for yourself as a company, some of the value you leave for the customer. And so the implication of that is that there are two ways in order to create more value. For all businesses in the entire world, which is why this is so amazingly exciting, there are only two ways to create more value. Imagine, for every business. One is reducing cost, another is by increasing the customer's willingness to pay. That's it. There's no other way to create value in the world of competitive advantage. Anybody disagree?
I don't disagree with them. How would you increase the customer's willingness to pay? That's the whole topic by itself.
Actually, it's easier than
Exactly.
lowering the cost of production.
Branding is why the most
Because
important.
it's all about psychology and marketing. If I come to people and say I have a solution for you to be to operate while being alive in MENA region, I can take $1 million from the organization. And not enough money to make people believe it, see it, visualize it through marketing and psychology.
What if you're a car manufacturer?
No, it's the feeling of speed, feeling of masculinity. I don't know, you find something and you invest in it. So that's why you make it going up on cars, because it moves some kind of.
I would encourage you to not work in production management. Car manufacturers, airplane manufacturers, computer manufacturers, electronic manufacturers obsess over reducing, or an iPhone. There are studies on an iPhone how they change the type of plastic that they use so they can save a ½ cent. Reducing cost of production is, whether you like it or not, a primary source of
But it's not like all, for example, you speak about car production, is the way Rolls-Royce tries to sell their cars, like the way Fiat is trying to.
From a marketing perspective, of course not.
So you have the luxury ones that sell the idea, as well as the ones who are trying to lower the cost, right?
So the argument here is that it is not that you should both reduce cost and increase customers' willingness to pay.
I think it depends on the segment, the target audience, basically.
And the business, right? I mean, for some business, I would argue for all of your businesses, you're not going to be thinking of how to reduce costs. Your primary goal in innovation-driven businesses is to think how to increase customers' willingness to pay. And unfortunately, for all of your businesses, right now your customers' willingness to pay is probably below your production costs because you're all taking some sort of salary, you have costs, and those costs are greater than the zero money that you're making right But you're obviously not trying to reduce costs, you're trying to increase customers' willing to pay. So no, it very much depends on the industry. But for any business, those two strategies are the only ones to produce value. And if you find a different way to produce value, you should immediately write a book about it, because you'll become really, really, really famous. To create value without doing one of those two things. So all of this theory is based on this guy, Porter, who's this really famous professor at Harvard Business School, and now pretty much he's the only person who knows anything about competitive advantage. And here we are talking about it. Okay, so now what I wanted to do is apply this model to jobs.ps. Amjad, can you hear me? Please unmute. He looks like he's asleep.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
Amjad, can you hear me?
We're all muted.
Yes, yes. Oh, yes. I'm hearing you.
All right, well, you better be engaged now because we're about to talk about you.
Yes.
So how does jobs.ps create value?
Okay.
So we're going to start with the cost of production. What's the cost of production for jobs.ps?
The cost of production is this salaries, the main cost of production, servers, and some technical development. This is the cost of production. But we work in the competitive advantage in reducing the cost. We have a competitive advantage over our customers or traditional ways comparing with local newspapers and others. Also, we work on the second thing we are working in is the quality of applicants. This is our competitive advantage. So we are sending to our employers a qualified candidates for their job posts and a high exposure to more candidates.
Let me stop you there, because we'll talk. These are all important points you're raising, and I'm really interested to hear about them actually. But we're going to start with just the cost of production, which you said is the salaries and services.
Yes, the main cost of production is salaries, the highest cost of production.
Okay, and so what is the value? Thank you, Amjad. From somebody else, what is the value that jobs.ps produces?
Salaries for people themselves, so they, through this service, they're actually, being linked with multiple employers and whatever, and giving them an opportunity to actually make income.
And for the companies, it provides an easy way to attract or to get introduced or reach out for the best candidates.
Okay.
Opportunities
For whom?
for people who use the service.
For applicants. Okay. So I heard from Ashraf and from you, we're talking about applicants, the people, job opportunities for people to apply, and then value is created for the company. So there are two actually groups that we're creating value for, right? It's not just the employers, it's also the employees.
That's why it would probably have two different costs.
Indeed.
You also might have like another advantage like statistics, maybe for some associations or the government about employment.
Sure. Absolutely. I don't think they do that right now. And for now, we're going to focus on these two customer sets.
Actually,
Really?
we do provide statistics. The latest statistics we provide to IYF actually, and some newspapers.
Smart guy. Good. For now, we'll focus on the job applicants or visitors to the site and the advertisers. So thinking about this model of competitive advantage, we have the production cost. Where do we place the price to the customer here?
Price to the customer? All the way down, if there is no cost.
Yeah, zero, right? Nobody pays anything to go apply right now. I think there are other sites where that's possible. And what's the value to the customer? On your hand. Is it above or below the production cost? It's above the production cost. How do you know?
because it's an ongoing thing. Like it's a value that if they actually get a job from whatever, it's an ongoing value. It's like from month to month. So if they get a job that's a 5-year contract, that's higher than.
Okay. All right.
Well, the evidence of that, or the symptom of that, is that there are actually people who are using it.
How much are they paying now?
Nothing.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody disagree? Yeah. We're going to talk about employers in a second, but just the customers themselves. How do we know? Why do we think?
Customers as in applicants?
Yeah. Sorry, the applicants here. We're just talking about job applicants.
As a whole or one applicant?
As a whole. What is the value to job applicants? Is the value to job applicants greater than the production? So I would argue it's lower. Why? Because if it were higher, then the customers would pay for it. And right now they don't pay for it. In fact, there are very few job boards where customers can pay in order to receive a job. So although the value that they get in life is certainly greater, I assume greater than the production cost, the simple fact that they don't pay for it is evidence enough to me that the value that they assign to this is less than the cost of production. Otherwise, they would be willing to pay for it.
Don't you think people are not paying for it because they were never charged for it? So if it was a niche company that have more contacts or can reach to the higher jobs and they charge for it, people would actually subscribe and upload the CVs and pay money for looking for a job.
Can you think of a prominent job site where people
LinkedIn.
Okay.
Many people actually do pay to
I
get a premium.
agree. But I think that's in the market of job seeking in general. That's definitely an exception.
I would agree, actually.
But why is it just because it's free that it doesn't have, it's not, the value's not high? Like, we could say that oxygen is free, but without oxygen, people are useless. So,
unfortunately, if you were in the business of producing oxygen, then that would be true. So as a market rule, if there's an opportunity to charge customers for something, you're going to charge them for it. So Jobs.ps finds itself with the obligation of not charging customers because that's what the market says you have to do. And if the market says that's what you have to do, that in the world of competitive advantage says that the value that the customers assign is less than your production cost. Because if there were an opportunity to squeeze money out of them, then the market would do it, because this is what markets do. And because they're not doing it, except for LinkedIn. Because they're not doing it, then the customer must inherently assign a value that's less than the production cost. Any disagreement? Case for
Can be a very long discussion.
Because, yeah, another argument.
Some questions.
Another argument is setting the production costs, because we don't really have to put all the production costs for the customer side, or sorry, for the visitor side, because I think the biggest percentage of the production cost goes to the advertisers side. So
yeah,
I think the values shouldn't be the same for the.
I think that's a fair point, and I think it's, in my mind, it's kind of an accounting question also, because I mean it's website maintenance, so how do you assign, to which portion of job applications versus. But I think it's a fair point. You could make the argument, but in any case, to me, because customers aren't paying, we know that the total cost to the company, the value that they assign is less than the production cost of the company as a whole. So I put it as less, but I think it's an important discussion. All right, now let's talk about advertisers. We have the same production costs. What is the value to advertisers? And here I mean employers who are posting to the website. Where do we put the value to job posters? Production costs.
Should be above, because they are actually paying.
Right. So here it's definitely above.
Oh, it's the sorry.
Oh, man.
It's past me.
So here the model works fine, right? The production cost is below what the employers are paying, or advertisers are paying to post. In Jobs.ps shares some of that value with them. And importantly, the production, with the excess that they produce, produces enough excess value that they're able to pay for the production costs associated with receiving applicants. So they can lose money per applicant while they make money on employers. So a well-known model I'm sure you've all heard about. Okay, so that's jobs.ps. So thinking about competitive advantage, how can jobs.ps make more money? Just according to what we did before.
Reduce production.
Right. Thank you for the obvious answer. So one is reduce production costs. Fire people or have fewer servers. Probably not a good idea. In this business, I can't imagine there's a big excess. Yeah.
I guess that
Oh.
That's okay.
So applicants have to pay.
Yes.
Not pay, not actual pay. You can get it. You can still get it for free. It's a premium. You can do it as a premium. For example, if you want to pay, for example, pay X amount of dollars, and we'll find you someone for you to apply.
Or maybe you can look into the website. If you want to apply for this job, you can
And services.
to open the
Exactly.
Like a CV writing service, having their writing service.
Sorry, your name? Hussein. Disagree.
You can't make the pay what they globally do not pay for. Like the whole market doesn't take money for like.
everybody pays for it.
Yeah.
Everybody.
No, actually, usually,
if you want to have extra access to more.
I think for job
Yes,
recruitment,
but-
usually the
I understand.
advertisers pay. That's even globally, the company that posts the job, they pay. With all employment services that I've seen, but actually CV, it's called consultancy in job recruitment. That could be
CV
actually.
writing, yes, people pay for CV writing, but the headhunters, recruitment companies, all of them, the whole market, you never the one who's looking for the candidates.
Exactly.
This is how the market works. Now you can't come and change. Because,
Well, I mean, LinkedIn does make a lot of money from
but it's not
applicants.
only actually applicants. You're paying an image on it. I want people when they look at my LinkedIn to.
Sure, but I think about it. I mean, there are plenty of additional services you could offer. I mean, CV
Yeah.
writing, even if it's beyond application, the direct, facilitation of applications. There are other services they could offer, and here, I mean, the model would be the same. How can we do something where the value that we're giving to the customer is greater than the price that we're asking them to pay? And what about for the people who are posting jobs? How can we increase their value besides reducing production costs? You had one idea, which they're already doing, which is statistics and analytics.
I think the site model people
Okay, explain.
increase the willingness to pay.
How would making the site more reputable increase willingness to pay?
For example, enhancing the SEO of the site.
And why will this increase willingness to pay?
Because when the site is more popular, then the willingness for the company to pay to put the advertisement on it will be high.
Okay. Why is it good for the site to be more popular?
For the site,
Yeah.
more the customers can put the advertisement on it.
There you go. Yeah. So increasing the SEO value of the site will increase the number of visitors, which will increase the number of applicants, which increases the probability that employers will find a good applicant, and that creates additional value. And I like your answer a lot because it's a popular idea we have as well. Make SEO better, right? But it's important to create a connection between what is increasing the quality of our search engine optimization. How does that actually increase customers' willingness to pay? So it's the same idea here. Okay, so that's everything I have to say about competitive advantage and the creation of value. Are there any questions on that? I mean, there are whole books written about what I just went through in 10 slides, but is it clear? Okay. All right. So the next topic that we'll talk about is another one of my favorites. Are people familiar with Porter's 5 forces? No? Okay. Just one? Oh, it's so sad. He's like Maybe when I start to remember. Okay. So, so Porter's five forces. So there are lots of ways to understand how you can increase your competitive advantage. The most basic way is through Porter's five forces. Porter's five forces does not tell you what are your competitive strengths and weaknesses as an individual company. It does not tell you what your strengths and weaknesses are as an individual company. What it does tell you is the profitability of an industry. So you can use Porter's five forces to figure out which industries are more likely to make a lot of money and which industries are more likely to make not a lot of money. And how does that help you? It helps you because you can figure out, A, should I enter this industry that's really, really very competitive and is not producing a lot of profits? Or it can tell you, as an individual player in this industry, what are the things that I can do to fight the competitive forces that are happening within my industry? So what you should remember about Porter's five forces is that it's about how to understand the profitability of a whole industry, not your profitability as an individual company in that industry. And I'll keep repeating that, so it's okay if you didn't get it or didn't. So we'll go through a bunch of examples of this, but that's the idea. So lo and behold, here they are, the five forces that made this guy Porter super, super famous. So I'll go through them quickly, and then we're going to do a few examples. Okay, so the most important force is the one in the middle, which is the intensity of industry rivalry. And so what that means is companies in this industry, how badly do they want this industry? How invested are they in this industry? And this often corresponds to the amount of money they've invested in the industry. So if they've had to put a lot of money in the industry, like the airplane industry, the airplane industry has extremely high capital costs. And so that means companies in this industry are willing to go bankrupt before they leave the market because they're extremely committed to the market. Industry rivalry is also high if the market is growing slowly. So if you're in a market that's dying or has very low growth, then the companies in that industry tend to be more competitive. So industry rivalry is basically a measure of how committed are the companies in this industry to that industry. Okay. Next is threat of substitutes on the bottom in the middle. So substitutes, a substitute is not how likely am I to use your competitor. A substitute is how likely am I to use a product from a different industry. So for example, in the bottled beverages industry, in the carbonated beverages industry, a substitute is not Sprite versus Coca-Cola. A substitute is water or not drinking anything at all. So a threat of substitutes, how easily can I pick a product from a totally different industry from this industry? Make sense? Right? Bargaining power of buyers. So your buyers are the people who are actually purchasing the Coca-Cola, for example. How much power do they have? And sometimes when we think about this question, we think buyers have they don't have a lot of power because our buyers are in the millions. And if you're Coca-Cola, then your buyers do not have a lot of bargaining power. They have very low bargaining power. But if you think of other industries, think of like, what a bad example. Defense contractors, whose customers are governments. Their customers are governments. They have very few customers, so the customers are very consolidated. And so in that industry, defense contracts, your buyers have a lot of power. And when your buyers have a lot of power, it tends to decrease the profitability of the industry. Okay, and then we have threat of new entrants. So how easy is it to start a new company in this industry? Again, using the example of the airplane industry, it's really hard to just go and start an airplane company. You need millions and millions of dollars. And so in that industry, the threat of new entrants is extremely low. And then the last force is the bargaining power of suppliers. So if you think of the suppliers for creating a computer are all the parts suppliers. And so in that industry, there are a lot of parts suppliers. They're very diverse, and they tend to be very small, and so they don't have a lot of power. But if you're a hotel booking website, for example, your suppliers are the hotels. And in that case, there are not so many hotels as there are parts suppliers of computers, so your suppliers have a lot more power, and that's bad for the industry in general. So that's a really quick overview of Porter's 5 forces, and we're going to apply this together to the automotive industry, so car production. So what do you all think the intensity of rivalry is in this industry? Why? Okay, so one is there are a lot of car manufacturers, and that makes it that increases rivalry. Yeah. What else?
For the other 4, no, it's low. For example,
We'll just focus on the middle.
oh, sorry, yeah. No, okay.
Changes to power sources.
What do you mean?
Like going from gas to electric or hybrids or whatever. That changes the industry rivalry, like people trying to compete for.
Okay, sure. So changing industry dynamics makes it a more competitive, for sure. For sure it does.
I can say that it's a very, very, very high intensity industry. Because just look at examples. For example, Honor, Dodge, they've been closing down for almost 5 years. They are closing in 5 years since it started to close down the factories and their production line. So they're very committed to the market, and that shows that it's a very intensive market.
Right. They'd rather. Yeah. Good. And why does it take so long for them to close down? Committed. Why else? Is it easy to start a car company? Why? It's really expensive to start a car company. On the internet, for what it's worth, where is it? You have to be able to produce at least 5 million cars to be competitive. I don't have the ability to start a car company tomorrow. So it takes a lot of capital to start a car company, and when there's a lot of capital involved, it makes it really hard for companies to get out of the industry. If you die, you tend to die very, very slowly, and you really don't want to die.
But there are examples that there are some car companies that until today they didn't reach the 5 million, for example, on Lamborghini. They didn't reach the 5 million, and I can bet on that. They didn't even reach the million.
Right.
Because they produce 500 or up to 1,000 cars per model per year. That's it. They've been working for them.
Too expensive.
But it has its exclusivity and its uniqueness. That is how it comes.
And so it's a really good point because it points to the biggest difficulty in using Porter's 5 forces is defining your market. And it's actually the most important part to using Porter's 5 forces, and when you use this with your own businesses, you'll see how very difficult it is. Step 1 is you have to say, what is the market? I put the automotive industry, which is very extremely broad. Inside of the automotive industry, you could say just high-end manufacturing of cars, where the 5 million number would be totally irrelevant, and these 5 forces would be totally different. So I'm really glad you brought up the point. You could have an entire argument, the length of this session, just about how to define your industry. So when you do this analysis for your companies, think really hard about how to define the industry. And when we do it for your company, it was the part that I struggled with, actually, when I was doing the analysis. Okay, good. So very strong industry rivalry. How about threat of substitutes? What are substitutes here?
Walking.
Bike, walking.
Flying horses.
Flying horses, I love it. Thank you, yes.
Space jets.
Space jets. You did that exercise too? Oh, yeah. Okay. Everybody knows about flying horses. Yeah. Okay, so there are a lot of substitutes. Do we think
anything that takes from point A to point B is a substitute?
Okay.
Transportation. Public transportation.
Public transportation, yes.
Walking.
All right, so there are a lot of substitutes. How would we rate the threat of substitutes?
I think relatively high if you want to look at the changing of things. Like lots of places in the world, people are tending now to use less cars because of the pollution, because of the money saving. You can find that it's coming out, like in the bikes now with the small motor, you like all over Jerusalem. So, that's fine.
Okay. Anybody? Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's that high though. I mean, because multi-family households are not going to use a bike or a motorized vehicle. You know, and you don't necessarily use a plane going from one city to another if you're in the same state, for example, in the U.S. So you would most likely take a car or vehicle.
The thing that you could do is to increase the customer's willingness to pay, to eliminate some of the other substitutes. For example, if you increase the speed, just as an example, then your power is in the speed. So, for example, the bikes can compete with you.
Okay.
So you have to define your strength points.
So if we think of all we all agree there are lots of alternatives for cars, but if we think of the spectrum of uses of cars, how many of those uses do we think there is a substitute for? So I've just gave one example. You're a family, you're not going to use a bike as a substitute. You could also use public transport, you could also walk as a family, but you can't because the use that you have is not appropriate for those substitutes. So when people use a car, how many of the uses that they have do we think have a realistic alternative for substitute?
Public transportation.
Actually, in some cities, like cars are losing its value because the streets are very crowded. So if you go by your car, like you spend too much time. It's better to go on public transport.
I think the thing is that a lot of, as I said, like a lot of different powerful organizations are working towards making people go to the alternative. Like, you go to people who are thinking about the environment, they try to push people to get to the cars and build public transportation. States, same thing, they're building trains for people, like, every day more and more, so they can use less cars, more public transportation. So there are powerful actors that are pushing towards achieving.
But there are uses, for example, I want to simply use it alone. Why not use it, for example?
You could use a headphone.
That's powerful.
I'm glad you all are so progressive and you're thinking about alternative forms of transportation. The typical analysis for this market in the United States, I think it's actually very different outside the U.S., is that the spread of substitutes is very weak. Why? Because when people need to use a car, it's for some specific reason. That you have a family, you have to go a long distance, you're going to a place where there is no public transportation or where you can't take a bike. So traditionally, we think of this as a market with extremely low, weak threat of substitutes. In Palestine, I think it's different, and in crowded cities, it's definitely different. For more progressive people who want to avoid polluting the environment, it's different. In the U.S., the vast majority, though, those are not realistic substitutes, even though there are a lot of substitutes. But you all raise really important points. Okay, moving along. By bargaining power of the buyers.
Sweet.
Why?
Because your customers aren't particularly powerful. Because they need the car. So they don't have really strength in imposing their own requirements.
Okay.
I can debate that. But there are two types of buyers. There's the wholesaler, and the wholesaler says to the
Excellent point.
To the retail says to the customer.
Right. So we're just going to talk about end users. Yeah. But that's a really important point.
He doesn't.
Okay.
That's that price. If you don't like it, go buy another thing with a lower price, but you don't get the same features, the same exclusive. That's how they buy.
I was going to say, like, that's why companies make so many different models, is to kind of meet the needs of the buyers. So, like, buyers do have that power because there are multiple ranges of Rolexes. You can buy a Rolex for $1,500, you can buy a Rolex for $3,000, but you're reaching out to different people. Same with cars. You have a high model S class for Mercedes, but then you have the C class. So I think the car companies keep that in mind because of the fact that buyers have different tastes.
Hold on. I'm sorry, your name?
My name, Mohammed. Actually, with too much like competitors, like you can buy Mercedes, BMW, or any car, and you will pay too much money. This makes you like strong buyer. Like you are not like buying Coca-Cola for like few shekels. You are paying relatively large amount of money, and you can choose.
Okay, so I've heard two arguments now for buyers being stronger. One is they have a lot of choices and it's a highly varied market, and another is that it's a large purchase decision. And then on the other side, there are a lot of buyers, and so that decreases their buying power. Who else wants to argue for low power? Or either way, the same.
It's a very large market, which makes the buyer much weaker, but there's the reason they create different kind of cars, because they want people with different kind of income to be able to buy. They want their own telephone, they want their own watch, so they just give you, they take the money back. Phone, they make it better, if it's less, they make it better. But I think the market is huge, so there's no power for the buyer.
I agree with that. Like, for instance, if you go to Germany, when they invented this market, they did it because people weren't that rich. That's why it looks better. You translate it the power of the people in Arabic, so that's why they created it. In order to make more people to afford it, to buy it.
Right, and so those are the really good discussion. Those are the two.
I was about to say medium.
So you have on one side there are a ton of customers. On the other side, it's a highly varied market that serves every need that we can possibly imagine.
But I think the question for the car industry, if a buyer wanted to bargain, will the supplier actually accept the bargaining? For example, if somebody wanted to bargain about the Mercedes car, will the Daimler
in that
bargain?
In that market, no. But I mean, in general, yeah, there's a lot of bargaining when you buy a car.
There's a very famous quote, I think, for the Ferrari. Say if you need to know how much it costs, you can't afford it.
I'm really glad you guys are so interested in very high-end products, which is the theme here. Rolex, Ferrari.
It's actually astonishing how you can make people pay much more than the real value because of what they feel about it. Symbolic power.
I hope you guys are doing a session on pricing, because there's tons of really good cases in theory on that exact topic. Okay, all right, threat of new entrants.
Automotive industry?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Does anyone disagree?
it's possible for a new entrant to come in, but it's going to take a lot of marketing, a lot of money, and goes to the.
You can give an example on that. Saudi Arabia, they build their own car, they're selling it. They have, yeah, they've invested more than, I think, $25 million just in the
just 25 million.
Just to manufacture the first factory.
Because
Just to have the first factory.
maybe 25, maybe 25 billion.
25 billion.
25 billion.
Yeah, just build the factory and just start manufacturing. Without the material, without the raw, just the factory. And they don't sell the cars, and it's still weak. But they put it as a competitor to Mercedes. That's
They
what
can
they're
do
aiming
that.
for.
They're aiming high.
They have money.
All right, let's keep moving. Okay, bargaining power of suppliers in the automotive industry,
Lots of suppliers.
right? And so,
it's weak.
all right, why else? Or disagreeing with the needs? Why?
It's not easy to start a factory, for example, to manufacture the gearbox, for example.
Okay, and so?
So I think it's medium.
So the fact that it's an interesting point. So the fact that it's difficult to start a gearbox manufacturer makes the supplier stronger or weaker?
I think.
No, the thing is, sorry.
Them stronger.
It makes them stronger.
That's important. For their own industry, the threat of the new entrants is also very weak.
Okay, a really interesting point. Yeah.
Based on my shareholder knowledge of that, I think it's they have actually power because we hear a lot about this car, for example, changed their suppliers. So VM is doing the supplies for I don't know which company, and it has to be someone who specialized in some part of the car to do it. It's only me that can supply it, and when you want to change, we have to announce it. And everyone has to have a point of view about it.
Again, for BMW, though.
Yes, yes, but doesn't every car company have to
The thing is-
actually say who's doing the wheels or who's doing the...
The thing is, the most important point in both of these arguments is to define the entry of the supplier. So, for example, if the supplier is, for example, if BMW is buying their own, are making their own gearboxes, then the supplier is basically the guy that supplies the plastic and the iron and everything. But then it's going to be weak. But if BMW buys the entire gearboxes as ready, as units, then the supplier is strong.
Yeah. Okay, hold on. Oh yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So, the main idea is between car factories and car manufacturers that they sell each other's parts to each other. So you can find a BMW engine on an Uzi car. That's normal. You can find that, and the gearbox from the Uzi on the BM. That's normal as well. It's not that parts, but it's the actual material that's built for the iron, the plastic, and all that. That's the real cost behind everything.
Okay, so this point that you raised is extremely important to competitive strategy, and this is called the threat of backwards integration. So what is the probability that a company like BMW is going to buy their former engine manufacturer, which they apparently did one day? And so if you're in an industry, also it's true in pharmaceuticals, for example. If you're in an industry where the companies in that industry have a good probability of buying the suppliers that are supplying them with what they need to be successful in the industry, this makes the suppliers extremely weak, right? Because the suppliers are constantly worrying, am I going to be bought by the by the company that I'm selling to? And so here, that's absolutely the most important factor at play. And so when it is just about plastics and metals, it makes the suppliers weak. As we have here. Okay, and so what does all of this mean? So we have, in the middle, very strong industry rivalry, but everything else is between weak and medium. And so the whole point of Porter's 5 forces, he did lots of statistical analysis on this in lots of different industries, is that it will tell you how profitable is this industry. And the car manufacturing industry is, if you compare it with other industries, it's medium profitable. There are industries that are much more profitable. The airline industry is much less profitable. So this kind of analysis should tell you how much money you can make in this industry. Okay, let us now, we have 25. Okay, let's very quickly imagine a different example, but with server software. So the software that runs on servers. Totally different industry. I just want to go through quickly. So really big, any very large company that has hundreds or thousands of servers has to buy software that runs those servers. It tends to be very, very expensive software, highly specialized. The market is getting more competitive, but it's generally very specialized software. So what do we think the intensity of rivalry in that industry is going to be?
Just say that it's weak.
Sorry?
You just say that it's weak.
Why?
But there are not much companies making software.
Right, so very few companies in this industry, not very intense rivalries. Threat of substitutes. If I'm a company that buys server software, what are my alternatives? Pretty much none, right? I'm either going to buy from this industry or I'm not going to have servers. Bargaining power of the buyers.
Also, because there aren't much competitors, so they're forced to advance. You either buy this one or this one, you can't bargain with either.
How big are the customers?
Huge.
Tend to be very large.
Yeah.
But how many of them are there?
4.
4. There are a lot, right? So every large company needs to buy server software.
Yeah.
But they tend to be very large companies. So individually, they tend to be very powerful. But as a group, there are a ton of them. So the bargaining power of buyers, I would argue, is medium. Not low, because although individually they're very large, multi-million-dollar contracts, there are a ton of them. So if you want to sell, you're going to sell, basically. Threat of new entrants. Why?
I think it's kind of similar to the other example. Like once you already have all of these huge server companies already dealing with you, it'd be really hard to try and convince somebody to kind of like, hey, I know you're already dealing with them, but I can give you a fraction of the price. This is not something that's
right.
I think it's weak, but not very weak, because I think if you come up with a new algorithm that somehow, somewhere, it solves a problem for the users, then yeah, then there might be a chance for this entrant. That's the thing, if you have a very competitive strategy, then
if you have some killer feature that's gonna. But does this industry depend on killer features?
It's mostly depend on the support. The support that they give for the company.
And is it hard or easy to build up good support?
I think it's hard.
Extremely difficult, especially for a very complicated product like server software. So I would argue weak, very weak actually, and it's not a very sexy industry. It's not one that people are, consumers aren't excited to innovate in server software. And the bargaining power of the suppliers. Who are the suppliers in building server software?
Your staff, developers.
So people inside of your company can never be suppliers. So no.
No supply.
There can never be no supply. They have to input something in order to output something. And that's inside the company. And you can never call something inside the company supplier. So what's the supplier?
Actual server? No, that's the
So it's like, for software, it's like the electricity company, the water company. Really. I mean, that's, because it's the manpower, it's everything, and those don't count as suppliers because they're inside of the company. So what's the bargaining power of them?
Very high.
Very high. So it's like 0. And so, the electricity company?
Yeah. You can't bargain the price.
I guess you can't, but they're not going anywhere. There's always going to be an electricity company. So all the forces in server software are very low, very weak forces as an industry, and it just so happens to be the most profitable industry that's around right now. So the point being, Porter's 5 forces is really good at predicting the profitability. All right, now we're going to do an example with online supermarket delivery.
Yeah, I'm scared of that, I know.
Well,
yeah, no, don't teach it at all. Don't teach it at all.
What do we think the definition of the market is?
Women trying to get to buy things without going out.
That's the target customer.
Why women? Men buy.
I was waiting.
Because they are working on the phone.
Oh god. All right.
Don't go there.
Anyways, the question is not the target customer, what is the industry as a whole? Yes.
Yeah, you can tell by the argument.
Is the industry
It's a delivery service. It's not a supermarket service. It's a delivery service.
okay? All right. So our competitors are
Taxi companies.
interesting. Okay.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
I think you need to define the target audience or the target country as well. For example, in Palestine, yeah, taxi. But for example, outside the US, the FedEx might be a competitor. Wassel, by the way, could be a competitor.
Not for a supermarket.
Not for supermarket.
I mean, but yeah, okay.
There are these bicycle delivery
Couriers, yeah.
Like in the UK, you will never pay tax to take something.
Exactly.
Not the price to take, but there are these people who bring it on
But
bicycle.
you have to also think about how much they can carry.
And you'll be surprised.
What about the supermarkets? What about the industry being supermarket?
That's totally different story.
Why?
Because you have different suppliers, you have different.
Aren't the supermarkets interested in potentially doing this themselves?
They do actually. So that's what
Okay, so it's a tricky question. So for now, we're going to assume the market is the delivery of supermarket goods as an industry. So couriers might be interested, but they're not in the industry right now. Some supermarkets are in the industry, but I guess not a lot.
No, from every 100 supermarket you can find 2 to 3 that actually do deliver and they only look at the local area using the, the little voice in the foreign market.
Cheap labor.
Locally.
Yeah.
So if we define the industry this way, what do we think the intensity of industry rivalry is?
Well,
Right.
it's not there yet.
Okay, because there are few competitors. Okay.
Is
Other.
there something that is slow, but the minute it starts, it will become high, I think?
There's another category for this. Threat of new entrants. Right.
Does it right now? It's very
But let's think about what happens if supermarkets decide to do this themselves. What is the threat? What is the industry rivalry?
Like all supermarkets decided to do it themselves, then it increases. But if 1 or 2 or even 10% of the supermarkets decide to do it themselves, then the rivalry will still be low.
But here,
Because the coverage of the area would be still low.
Imagine the market. Forget about online delivery. Imagine the market as supermarkets. Just starting supermarkets. What's the intensity of industry rivalry for supermarkets?
Very high.
Certainly. Why? Because okay, there are a lot, but why else?
it's guaranteed that if you open one, you will sell.
They already have the customers.
And okay, they have to build up a customer base. It's generally a profitable. It tends to generate money, and it tends to sustain families' livelihoods. Right. So if you have a supermarket, you're putting some food on the table for somebody, so you're pretty dedicated to this industry. So I would actually argue that because rivalry in the supermarket industry is high, that if supermarkets wanted to do this themselves, it would be something they'd be very dedicated to. And I think this point, that the threat of new entrants, although in a separate category, is high, once they do enter, they're going to be very dedicated, and there could be a lot. So I put meeting with a question mark.
Free, right? Most will do it mostly for free. So it's
On a low
better for
scale.
supermarkets themselves to have someone else doing it for them. Like most supermarkets will do it for free.
But the thing is, where do you get the money from? From the supermarket or from the...
From both.
So yeah, it's
Now you know.
totally different.
Choose one.
All right, let's keep moving. So threat of substitutes for online for delivery. What's that? What? What is it? Huh?
The size of the supermarket, it depends on how many customers you have.
Okay, but in general, if I'm looking at delivery options and I'm a delivery company, what are the alternatives to using a delivery company? Walk to the supermarket, drive to the supermarket, call a taxi, or drive.
No, I mean, for me, I would never like buy something for a supermarket online because I love to search products and choose whatever I like. I enjoy
Complete
shopping.
user experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where it changes the value. It doesn't, for example, the delivery stuff, it manages your daily tasks, your morning.
Right, so there have to be additional features or values in order to justify this. But I think we can agree the threat of substitutes is very strong here, primarily because it's a product that's not currently in use. So obviously the substitutes are what's dominating the market right now. Okay, bargaining power of the buyers.
It's going to be high, I think.
Why?
Because the threat of substitutes is high.
Okay, why else?
Because
You don't really have
start
to.
with a small number of people.
Sorry?
You start maybe with a niche, a small number of people with one strategy. Not moving to the market.
They don't have much market, but the price is almost the same with all supermarkets.
So the buyers don't have power because the prices are the same? Okay, but if they're gonna, okay, who wants to react?
I guess the buyers have like a huge power because
I'm sorry, what's your name?
That's it.
No, sorry, what's in your phone that's so important right now?
A friend of mine is leaving, so that's why we texted with my.
If it's so important, could you step out? For me, it's really distracting. Sorry, everyone. Sorry, I was extremely distracted.
Anyway, so the buyers have a lot of power because he, as a delivery company for supermarkets, he won't generate revenue without buyers. So they have a lot of, he has to give a lot of effort to convince them.
They have a service right now. So
that's the thing. If it's correct to have the arguments for the bargaining power of buying as a result of another porter force. Because of the threat of subsidy which is high, then the bargaining power of buyers is going to be high as well. Because there are lots
not
of
necessarily always the case, but here for sure. Totally agree. Yeah. Okay, threat of new entrants in this market?
It's also high, I think.
Why?
Because it's easy to start such
It's
service.
not easy, but people who already think, people who believe that they can do it easier than you, the supermarkets will just try at least. Everyone will try to do the service.
What's the hardest part of entering this industry?
We're talking just about the delivery service. We're not talking about the online.
Right.
The logistics. Logistics.
Okay.
Because, for example, if you want to get your own cars for the delivery service, buy your own cars, you have to spend at least 10,000 shekels per month just to have that car and deliver it.
And what about the relationships with the supermarket?
Okay, so if we're going to talk about the relationship with the supermarket, then everything, the media and the restaurant, this will change.
No, but how difficult is it to create relationships with supermarkets?
For us to create, or the customer to create a relationship.
For you.
For me, so it's not actually very difficult. Supermarkets are really starting to go with online business. Very much.
I would guess that would be more difficult. So anyway, so the logistics is the most difficult part. Okay. So I said medium, but I think that sounds about right, but for different reasons from what I was expecting. The most interesting one, in my opinion, the bargaining power of the suppliers. Who are the suppliers? Supermarkets. What's their bargaining power here?
Actually,
Why?
They have products.
Okay.
His service doesn't exist without the supermarket's products.
Yeah.
whereas their servers can easily exist without his service.
The customer pay is not determined yet. But he has to create awareness at that moment.
Keep in mind that we only talking about the delivery service, not the online service.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah, but you are helping the suppliers to
Preparing
get
a
more
defense.
customers.
Sorry?
You are helping the suppliers to get more customers. So I think that we will not so high.
What's the threat of what we talked about before, of backward integration? What's the threat of the suppliers doing this themselves?
So it's high.
Extremely high, right? And many already do.
Yeah.
Right? Some, 2 to 3%. Anyways, greater than 0.
Good luck, Hamza.
Again, we're talking about delivery. We're not hoping to
Okay.
this on the delivery. So
Right.
So move on. Not for the delivery, the actual service, because we take money from the supermarket. The delivery service is something to complement online service.
Tell us more.
So
So the next part of this is what do we do with this information? How can we help?
this is why the delivery service is just a complementary service. We're not going to actually run the business of it. It's just complementary. We look at the.
And what's the primary service?
The primary service is the online subscription for the supermarket. That's the primary service. We take money from the supermarket. That's where our
For them to list their product.
Yeah, for them to list their product, have online presence, to have the delivery service as supplementary, to have advertisements on the website. We bring them extra customers from different areas other than their own area. That's the extra value, the big value that the customer, that the supermarket has.
And so in this world of 5 forces, what is the effect of those things that you just said?
Okay, so we're talking about
It changes one of these.
changes all of them. Not just one of them. Changes all of them.
So I would argue it changes the power of the suppliers. Because you said you're going to bring them more customers. So they have a bigger dependence on you. You've reduced the power that they have over you.
Yeah. And not just that. If they want to bargain on the price or anything else, it's easy. I just go to the supermarket next door. So they already have a huge competitiveness between each other. I can. If you don't want to pay this amount for this service, okay, I'll go to your name. That's another
That's
can
gonna-
have on the supermarket.
That's going to increase the cost for you.
No, that will keep the cost the same for me.
Then you will be delivering-
The supermarket will pay me the same price.
But the thing is-
Or this one.
You will be delivering the service or the goods from a more distant supermarket.
No, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Because there are some smart ways to do it. You don't have to get your own car and your own delivery services just to run. There are other services that you can use. For example, you get a guy to work for you 8 hours per day, and he handles all the parts, he handles everything regarding the customer, you're just paying 180 shekels, that's it. How many deliveries you have per day, that doesn't matter.
That's people use that.
Exactly. So that's the solution. So, I think
so the idea here, all these ideas that you're throwing out, I would encourage you to put them into each of these 5 courses, because every idea you just listed is changing the effect of one of these 5 courses.
The main core of the business is completely different than what's written over here.
This was not meant in any way as an attack or.
When you said the supermarket delivery, I completely expected it to be
Right. Really, this was just a big conspiracy theory against that. That was my whole goal. All right, so that's everything on Borders 5 courses. The last thing I'm really happy we have time to talk about is Khazanah. And so totally different. So that's Borders 5 courses, by the way. Any questions on Borders 5 courses? I'll send the PowerPoint. You can read Wikipedia. It's all really basic. Okay, so I don't know if I. Okay. All right. So. One implication of this, what we were talking about before, around willingness to pay and cost of production, is that it tells you some really interesting things about product development. And it tells you what features in your product you should focus on. Rather than trying to explain the whole theory about this, I thought I would do an application. So for Khazanah, if we identify from your product description, I picked these 4 features. Website quality, ease of trying on clothes, product diversity, and delivery options. Does everybody know what the site is, by the way, before we get into it?
It's not much of it. Don't put the current version, it's really bad.
Can you tell us, like, in 2 sentences what it is?
Yeah, it's an online platform that connects customers to their favorite brands, still discussing the second model, which is the tailored outfits, delivered to your home.
And what kinds of outfits or brands can you get?
Until now, we got them.
Oh, okay, so you can get brands that are not available here. I think that's a pretty
Not
key.
connected to Israeli shops.
Okay, but that's a pretty significant, that you can get brands that are not otherwise here.
Yeah, not outfits. Almost this year.
Okay. Almost this year. Not quite this year. Almost this year. All right, so now we're going to think about all the features of competitors in this market. And what we want to do is for website quality, we want to rate the range of quality. So we're going to put an X for every competitor. This is not a precise exercise here, but it works in general. So who are the competitor websites? And what I imagined here when I put the X's I'm about to show you, so hopefully they're right. How nice.
VIP and Namshi. Those are the companies. They're selling luxury brands.
How nice are the websites? Very beautiful.
I died when I said the different sites.
Okay, all right. So I guess the websites would be really crappy. So imagine these X's are all the way to the right. The point is the same, actually. They're all really nice.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to show you.
They donated $10 million in the first year.
Okay, it's okay. Okay, the point is actually going to be more clear. How easy is it to try and close for your competitors if you include in-store shops?
They can't try. They can't try close. I mean, we're trying to deliver the model that you basically can measure yourself to get the perfect size.
Okay, so but my question, the market here we're talking about is including the physical stores themselves. They don't have to do it. So you're only competing with online stores?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So then, all right. All right. So then, they don't have good systems for trying on the clothes.
No.
Are they all really bad, or some better than others?
No, they don't have it. You just get the size like medium, large, small.
Okay. So they're all really bad. Okay. Perfect. All right. What's the diversity of the products that they offer? And do they all tend to offer the same products, or do some offer more products than others?
Yeah, then she offered.
Okay, so there's a lot of. Is this more accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And delivery options.
They all have good delivery.
Good delivery options. That's totally wrong. Okay. The point is the same nonetheless. Okay. So if you're looking at this market, what is the logical, which feature, what would be your product development strategy? Which features, if, for example, what should your website quality be?
High.
Why?
Because all others are high.
Because everybody's high.
It should be extra high.
Why? Hold on. It should be higher than everybody else?
Not necessarily if the other features are also higher.
Okay. So if you had a choice, you're the head of product development, and you have a choice between investing. You have a website that's here, and you have a choice of investing more development into your website or into product diversity. Which would you choose?
Diversity.
Why?
People really care about the website because people are. It's like they're getting their favorite brands and lower price.
And then what?
Because everyone is high, but I need diversity to be able to actually match the market or stand out.
Just stand out.
The other thing is that because the core of the business is not in the website, it's in the product.
But it's not important. That's the beauty of this, is that when you look at these features, if you look at the dispersion of your competitors, you'll know which features you should focus on. For example, on the feature of ease of trying on clothes, how good does that feature have to be?
For your website?
For her website.
Just better than everybody else. So medium and.
So it does not need to be exceptional. It would not make sense for you to put an X here. It would not be a good use of your money to build an amazing system for trying on clothes through the website. You should build one it's okay. It shouldn't blow the market away. And I think the reason I bring this up is because I hear from a lot of entrepreneurs who want to build amazing features that are groundbreaking and are going to do amazing things, or they want to build a beautiful website. That's the most popular thing. I need a beautiful website or a beautiful logo for my company. All these things really don't matter if you only need to reach a minimum. So you only want to reach a minimum when the dispersion of the features is low. If the features look like this, then you just do the minimum amount of work. If the features look like this, then this product diversity is where Khazana should invest the most energy, because that's where the dispersion of features is the highest.
Is that always applies?
Always.
Can't you be selling more of an image?
If your instinct is to sell more of an image, then it tells me that your competitors have high dispersion in their image.
Actually, my competitors' image is far away from what I'm thinking of. But
Then you don't need a great image.
you always relate yourself to your competitor. You can't think in a different way.
No, not in the world of competitive strategy. Because you only need to be as good. You only need to be a little bit better than your competitor. And the excess resource that you have should not be put into being 100 times better than your competitor. Your resources should be invested in features that have high dispersion, like product diversity.
But shall I consider all the features have equal weights?
No, no, that's a really important point. And part of the whole theory in the book that's written on this is that they should be weighted. Yeah, for sure. I mean, ideally, the feature that you want to invest the most in is the one that has the highest dispersion and is the most important. That's so yeah. So that's everything. I think it's a good point to end on. It's quick and easy. Thank you guys so much.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. What's that? Right, the building. When should we?
Tomorrow.
Yeah, 1:15. But we have like a system for waiting.
I believe you, but
I think he doesn't understand. Okay, at 1:15?
No, that's 5.
Okay. All right. Well, I can figure out what he did. Hi, Ahmed. Oh. He said thank you. Oh, I'm really sorry. Okay. Oh, Ahmed. Oh, I didn't know he was here. Yeah. We ran out of battery.
Is it possible to, like, whenever you're free to chat about
Yeah, sure.
yeah, find out the correct access?
Yes, definitely.